patterns, even in black and white, you can tell, how strong the cultural aesthetic is, which completely comes through in these pictures. I brought you a lot of Indian history. Those of you who came to my mega 3-hour lecture of Shunit Jana in Deen Murti many years ago, this has just been published by Oxford University Press. And unfortunately it's not very well printed, but at least it is now available in print. So this is great history of a great photographer who unfortunately is not very well represented by the design and printing and publication of this book, but there is now in a reference that you can go through, and there's a very long text by him, his own text, which is about his own history as a political activist, as a photographer. So these are now beginning to come out, which are our own histories. T.S. Satyan died a few years ago from Mysore. Great photographer, primarily in 1950s, 1960s. And this is actually a memoir. It's not a photo book, but this is a memoir that he wrote in English, and it's wonderfully written. He was part of the group that came out of Mysore with R.K. Narayanan, the novelist, his own brother T.S. Nagarajan, Sharda Prasad, who became a very senior, I guess you could call him a bureaucrat in Delhi, secretary of Jawaharlal Nehru, Indira Gandhi. There was a group in Mysore which is a very specific Mysorean culture, which had a heavy English base on one level, but also very involved with Carnatic music, Carnatic dance. And if you read R.K. Narayan, you'll understand that culture. Satyan comes out of that. And this book is actually a magical book. It's one of the few, along with the Jana one now, which has just come out, it's one of the few photo narratives of contemporary India, the 50s and the 60s. This is over here. And this is Satyan's own book, which was inspired by The Family of Man, the Museum Modern Art book. This is like From Birth to Death. In a way, it's a bit of a simplistic idea, but this is one of the few published works of Satyan. So these are our own histories. Some of you came to the little discussion with Ahmad Ali the other night at the French Center. And there is another unwritten and unseen history. And naturally there's a bit of a bias here to the south, but that's a good thing, because in North India we tend to forget that there's a lot of other India around. Much lesser known photographer, Praful Patel from Bombay. And all of these I've kind of collected over the years, because I've sort of dug around. Many decades of work. On a completely different register, this is a fairly rare book, a rather well-known book, but very hard to get. And even when I got this in the US many years ago, it was in very bad condition. but it was a used copy. That's the only one I could get. This was actually designed by my design guru at MIT, Muriel Cooper, MIT Press. This is by Donald McCullin. Have all of you heard of Donald McCullin? How many of you have? Just one. He's still alive. Donald McCullin is one of the great war photographers. And this book is a personal book. He doesn't call it a book of war photography. It's called Is Anyone Taking Any Notice? He calls it a book on the human condition, and the dedication is this book belongs to the people in it. And he begins the book, it's the first image of a dead bird on the snow. It's a very dark book. It's about a very dark aspect of human life. He begins with pictures in Ireland and coal miners, you know, of a sort of bleak and tough life in Northern Europe. You see the design of the book. Sometimes there are small quotes which are from Solzhenitsyn's Nobel Prize acceptance speech, the Russian writer Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Otherwise they're captions, and the captions are broken up like little haikus in different columns. McCullin went on to photograph, particularly in the 60s and the 70s, all the horrific wars that were happening all over the world. Vietnam, Biafra, Bangladesh, famous pictures of the Bangladesh War 1971, and all those pictures are in here. And he shot a lot for Life magazine, especially for his pictures of Vietnam. But his reputation became so powerful that there was actually a cartoon made about two soldiers somewhere in a forest, and they're talking to each other, and one says to the other that, "Oh, I've heard that Donald McCullin has arrived. That must mean that this is a very serious war." Now these are just straight portraits, you know, which are shot in England, but you see that very dark vision. So he's somebody who had, you know, who had this vision of humanity. But this is a very different guy.